This is episode 725 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing.
And I'm Wally Drengmeister.
I'm president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. Wally, we'll start out by giving a shout out to those folks who created the technology to allow us to do this today. We always use some fancy internet-based technologies, but I think this is the furthest physical distance between us to do a show since we started with 725 here. So you are in Alaska. I am in New York City. So quite a distance, not just physical, but a few time zones as well.
Yeah, I was going to say you're two time zones to the right, and I am two time zones to the left.
Yeah, and we're still on the Guessing Family Vacation 2025. You're there for a work fun trip, but we're both doing this quite remotely. So getting ready to take on the Big Apple here myself over the next few days, but I will be back in Albuquerque, hopefully safe and sound for the next Tipping Point, New Mexico episode. So, first thing that we were going to talk about that came out recently is the CNBC report, which is Best States for Business. This is a report, I believe it's come out 19 times before, and I think it's a very solid report in terms of the way it approaches the issues. It's not the Rio Grande Foundation's report, let's be real, but it is something that I think has a lot of credibility to it. And as I think we've become accustomed here, if you watch or listen to Tipping Point, New Mexico, you will not be surprised to find that the Land of Enchantment does not fare particularly well. We're 44th overall, and the metrics are as follows. Economy, and we'll get into some of the behind the scenes, the methodology that they put into all this in a minute. Economy 46th, infrastructure 29th, workforce 31st, cost of doing business 23rd, business friendliness 39th, quality of life 33, technology and innovation we are at 35. So that is the top line news you can use, I guess, if you want to just look at this particular 2025 edition of the index. But Wally, that's kind of maybe baseline. Unfortunately, the media in New Mexico, I think they've got their fill of covering New Mexico's dismal ratings, whether relative to other states. So in my usual way, I took a look below the headlines. And this is an old report, not an old report, this edition, but they've been doing this report, I think, for nearly 2 decades. So I felt like it would be worth taking a crack at some of the past editions of the report. And that is truly where I think things got interesting. So the first thing is I just picked randomly. I figured a decade is a good amount of time to grasp the changes that New Mexico has undergone. And New Mexico was 24th in the ratings back in 2015. Now, I obviously it's important to know what we're dealing with in 2015 because 2015 was uh, Martinez in office. It was not a particularly big year for oil and gas. That didn't happen until a few years later. And the legislature was still Democrat controlled, but I think it's safe to say that you and I would probably agree that New Mexico was a better run, more kind of competently governed state at the time. And I guess I'll just go through this real quickly before I hand it over, then we can discuss. Uh, Workforce, and they changed the order of these slightly, but workforce in 2015, we were 16th. Cost of doing business, we were 23rd. Infrastructure, we were 5th. Uh, Economy, we were 24th. Quality of life, 24th. Technology and innovation, in 2015, New Mexico was 38th. So I'll go through some of the details in terms of exactly what happened over the intervening years. But to go from a decade with a oil and gas boom and to fall from 24th to 44th, that is quite a drop. And I think it's 100% governance. What's your take, Wally?
Well, Paul, as you look at this report, New Mexico doesn't fare too badly on something called cost of doing business, but that's, I think, rather direct kind of costs, things like rent. Our taxes aren't horrible. How these national trend or these national reports capture them, because it doesn't seem like they ever take fully into account our gross receipts tax because it's so unusual. But when you look at the things that really impact business, reasonable regulations, predictability, uh, good education system, low crime, we've not made progress on any of those. The legislators, a lot of them talk about their desire to move away from oil and gas as being the primary source of income to the state of New Mexico, and yet do nothing that helps that to happen. And so that's where we find ourselves falling further and further behind. And that, Paul, this is during a period in which many things that would have made our business climate even worse have been defeated a few times over the last few years, including some very onerous, very costly paid family medical leave and the like, much less the sins of our earlier times in terms of not being a right to work state. So yeah, we are we are falling behind, and it's not too big of a surprise why.
Yeah, I wanted to go through a few of the changes, the big changes, 2015 to 2025, in each of these variables. Starting off with the economy, which now in 2025 is ranked 46th. That was rated 24th back in 2025 and 2015. And that one's really uh, telling because you're talking about a state that has gone in under one of the biggest revenue booms in the history of our country in terms of the oil and gas wealth that we've seen pour into New Mexico, really for about the last 8 years. So starting pretty recent, pretty soon after this 2015 report, and for our economy to drop from 24th best to 46th best is really a problem. So won't dwell on that, but that is an important number. Infrastructure, now it is 29th, then it was 5th. And we have commented fairly regularly, and especially with the oil and gas boom, you should be seeing the opposite. The infrastructure should be improving, not getting worse and worse. And I think it's safe to say that, yeah, New Mexico had better infrastructure a decade ago. Moving on, we've got workforce. That deteriorated from 16th to 31st. Uh, then you have quality of life, which is a pretty bad indicator that that is falling further. We went from let's see, quality of life 24th down to 33rd. We did improve slightly in technology and innovation in that index over the decade from 38th to 35th, I believe. Business friendliness dropped as well. We were 39th in this year's ranking, and business friendliness is actually that's one of the things that wasn't on the previous year's index. That was the only new indicator. So we were at 39th. So it's there's a lot of variables and a lot of data points here, but it's pretty unfortunate to see that so starkly drop in a decade. And again, I lay the feet 100% at policies of Michelle Lujan Grisham and the legislature. Uh, a few data points, a few methodology concerns, points regarding that. The economic strength of each state, looking at GDP growth and job growth over the past year, state's fiscal condition, this all goes to the economy, its credit rating and outlook, spending, revenues and reserves, and pension obligations. Infrastructure, they measure the vitality of each state's transportation system by value and volume of goods shipped, by waterway, air, and roads, condition of highways and bridges, availability of air travel and time to commute. You would think that New Mexico wouldn't be too badly impacted, but those quality of roads and bridges is an issue. Cost of doing business involves taxes, of course, as you mentioned, wage, utility costs, cost of office and industrial space. Uh, those are some of the main points in this report. And again, just like virtually everything else that you and I talk about, things are moving in a direction that is not particularly favorable for New Mexico. I know the workforce thing, they really don't focus as much on things like school choice and the quality of the K-12 education system. But unfortunately, as we all know, that is definitely not a strong point for the state of New Mexico. It never has been, but it's gotten also worse in recent years. Anything else on that, Wally?
No, just Paul, a big summary of a report that captures a lot of details that a lot of other reports have captured over years. But the starkness of what's happened over the past decade, the long-term trend and the short-term trend are both not very good. And again, that's in spite of the fact that we've had a record growth in oil and gas production.
Yeah, I will quickly note that North Carolina is number one, Texas, Florida, Virginia, uh, number one through four. Ohio, believe it or not, made it to fifth. Michigan, number six, and so on. Uh, on the bottom end of the scale, Alaska and Hawaii. And I've got to think that that is partially, at least, a location driven phenomenon for those states because Alaska and Hawaii could not be more different policy wise, but because of their distance from the mainland, that's going to always make a difference for some of these business friendly kinds of ratings. Montana, Rhode Island, Louisiana, Mississippi, and then New Mexico. So, um, you know, business friendliness is related to, but not directly the same as things like free market policies. There are aspects of your location and airports and other various related factors that can have a big role to play in whether you want to locate your business there. It's one of the reasons that this is not at the center of what we talk about, but it is yet another important report. Unfortunately, the average person, the media, doesn't go to the Fraser Institute or even the Heritage Foundation when they look at the economic freedom or look at the likelihood of them wanting to put a business there. It's much more focused on, well, is this an attractive place to do business or not? So, yeah, moving on. Another major development in this last week, the Supreme Court has decided on a 6-3 basis to allow President Trump to fire Department of Education employees up in Washington, D.C. and elsewhere, wherever they may exist. But primarily, that's a arm of the bureaucracy that is in the D.C. area. And, I think that's a good thing. Will this result in the shuttering over a long or permanent time of a federal education bureaucracy in Washington, D.C.? I don't know. I think a lot depends on what happens in the next presidential elections and other aspects of education policy and what impacts this all has and how Trump finishes out his time in office over the next 3.5 years. But Wally, good news, I think, for efforts to shutter the Department of Education.
Yeah, Paul, and I think it's good news on a couple of different accounts. One of them is the fact that government spending is out of control in Washington. It's just crazy the amount of spending that has been going on there, and the courts have been fighting that pretty much every step of the way. The other thing that I think that's very important about this is that the Department of Education is a solution looking for a problem. It has not really done anything positive to increase the quality of education across the country. Where that's happened, it's been in spite of the Department of Education, not because of it. These decisions, when they're made well, are made at the local level, and the feds have not done a good job over the years making sure that that's something that benefited education for the entire United States.
Yeah. So good riddance to the U.S. Department of Education. Hopefully, um, other states that are actually making tough decisions to improve education will see those outcomes move the needle forward. Unfortunately, in New Mexico, we haven't and aren't likely to do anything that's going to move the needle with regard to educational performance. But I don't think the Department of Education has proven itself over, gosh, I guess you could say 4+ decades since the Jimmy Carter administration put that bureaucracy into place. So that's good news for those of us who want to see education system reformed and restored to state control, even if we don't like what the state of New Mexico's been doing with it. Wally, obviously, tragedy unfolding in Ruidoso, New Mexico, on top of the fires that we saw just last year. Now we're seeing some really just scary and massive flooding taking place in that city, that town. Very sad to see a lot of great people in Ruidoso. Definitely a area that's populated by folks that tend to think a lot more like you and me than maybe the average New Mexican. A lot of good conservatives in the town of Ruidoso, and just really unfortunate that over the last week or so we've seen a combination of those monsoon rains that have hit that particular beautiful mountain town and the burn scar from last year has led to some really nasty floods, destruction, death. Our prayers go out to folks in Ruidoso.
Yeah, Paul, it's one of those things. These fires are they are very they're very bad. And you know what happens is that you think the worst of it's over, you make it through the fire, you have your family is safe, but it can be years until things recover because of the risks of flash flood and everything that happens. And so it's just a very sad situation. I saw some videos of, of the initial flooding, basically a house being washed down the middle of what was the overflowing banks of a little stream that had, just taken over the entire canyon, and very sad for them. It seems some good news that the federal government was pretty quick to respond with some assistance there, and they certainly need it. But you'd have to think that not to be negative, but this may not be the last, issue we've seen from the fires of a few years ago in terms of the impact they caused in Ruidoso.
Yeah, and the racetrack is a big economic driver down there. I remember last year they had to move they call it the Futurity Classic race from their racetrack down there. Put a lot of resources into getting it back up and running, and only to see another round of flooding really devastate the racetrack down there. I don't know what the economic and kind of the costs, insurance and reconstructing it again, that is going to look like. But there's no doubt that the town of Ruidoso has taken a number of real shots recently, and the mountains there are beautiful. I'm not sure, not saying that that the forest management was optimal or wasn't optimal when the fires broke out. I do think that there's going to have to be some reevaluation and some resources put into making sure that this kind of devastation, this kind of 1-2 punch, if you will, and it's not the first time, it's not the only place in New Mexico where we've seen a burn scar followed by massive flooding. But you just got to manage these forests in a way that thins them ahead of time and prevents these real devastating fires that kind of carpet burn an entire area and then provide a path for that flooding. Again, I'm sure those things have happened for thousands of years, but I think we need to really evaluate forest policies. And I realize that, we just had this big, beautiful bill passed, and there was consideration of what to do with some federal lands. I'm of the opinion that I would rather see state governments in particular take on that task and the resources to do those tasks. And I think they would do a better job. But yeah, it's tough. It's a tough situation. Not sure how or what to do moving forward.
Yeah, and then another concern, Paul, that I'm starting to hear more and more about is that insurance is getting to be where we're having carriers pull out. We're having increasing areas due to fire, and in this case, flood, become uninsurable. The other thing to note is that your most homeowners policies have no flood insurance, so you don't have that to begin with. The federal government's the only one with the at least potential resources to address that. But that's another thing that needs to be managed, that needs to be taken a look at, because it can be, if you cannot get insurance, homeowners insurance for your home because of the risk of fire or other damages is so high, it can do a lot to damage a community. And again, the negatives just keep coming, unfortunately.
Yeah. Now, speaking of another beautiful area, an area more, I would say, beloved by folks on the national, international scale. I'm talking about Santa Fe. Santa Fe, of course, is also the capital. So when you and I talk about Santa Fe, we're talking more about bad public policies than anything else. But Santa Fe was named this week as the top city uh, by Travel and Leisure magazine. And, you know, this is something that they're named, let's see, number one U.S. travel destination for its natural beauty and food scene, according to Travel and Leisure. And this is survey data from people who presumably are readers of Travel and Leisure. They rated the cities based on sites and landmarks, culture, food, friendliness, shopping, and value. And I'm not here to say Santa Fe is not deserving. I'll list out other places that received votes: New Orleans, Charleston, Savannah, Alexandria, Virginia, Honolulu, Greenville, South Carolina, New York City, Asheville, North Carolina, and Chicago. Well, I think it's safe to say that those cities run the gamut. They're all being ranked based on their value as a tourism destination. There are some very well-governed places among that list, and there are some places that, like Chicago, I don't encourage anybody to try to start a business in Chicago. So it doesn't mean that they're not good places to visit. Santa Fe is a good place to visit, but I just think it's worth noting and highlighting the fact that, yes, Santa Fe in many ways is a very unique and great city for outsiders to come to and see what the American Southwest is all about, and especially that specific Santa Fe culture. It does have a lot of art. It's got the opera, it's got skiing, it's got all kinds of very interesting and neat features. That doesn't mean that the policies that are adopted either at the city level or at the legislative level in Santa Fe are as good as they could be or should be. Uh, we're measuring two different things here. This is much more, oh, did you go to Santa Fe? Did you have a good meal? Did you enjoy the activities that you could engage in around Santa Fe? So, kudos to Santa Fe, but it's not reporting on the things that are going to bring real prosperity to Santa Fe or New Mexico.
Yeah, Paul, I saw that initial report and, you look at a few and, I will highlight four cities that were on that list, Santa Fe, New Orleans or New Orleans, if I
Oh,
catch, yeah, the southern draw right, in Chicago and New York City. Um, I think in many ways and for different ways, for many people, they are a nice place to visit, but I wouldn't want to live there. And what that means is they each have their own uh, attraction from a history, art, culture, cuisine, nightlife, shows, depending on what different ones are. But that doesn't mean, but a lot of that happens in, the quote unquote tourist areas where there tend to be a little bit more police protection and you don't suffer from some of the other things that maybe are impacting the communities as a whole. And so I think Santa Fe falls into that. I think it's a little different than New Orleans, Chicago, and New York, in that maybe some of their problem is that because back to an earlier story, the business friendliness of Santa Fe is so low. uh, that while it's a very nice place to live, it's not necessarily a good place to work. So a lot of second homes there, a lot of empty, very nice second homes or homes that only get, used a few weeks a year, as opposed to being, active, vibrant communities with people living and working there. So, yeah, Santa Fe is definitely unique. It's also the city different, and that comes with this very nice accolade, but also there's some downsides there as well.
Yeah, and I, I guess where I take this whole thing is that we have a tourism department. We have a lot of money and effort put into making New Mexico in general well known and a destination for tourism. But tourism, those jobs, some of them are pretty good, but I think it's safe to say that tourism jobs are not really the most desirable jobs necessarily. Santa Fe, of course, is a very two-tiered city. You have real wealth, significant wealth, uh, wealth that compares in some ways or is brought in by people who made their wealth elsewhere. Uh, Whereas you also have a relatively large impoverished population, at least by American standards. You don't have a tremendous amount of what you call the middle class in Santa Fe, New Mexico. It's just you got the high ends or the low ends. And if you're in the middle, chances are you live in Albuquerque and you work remotely or you commute or something along those lines. It's just not a place that's very middle class friendly. And, you and I are probably a bit jaded in terms of our visions of Santa Fe and dealing with the legislature and kind of having to travel an hour up there to deal with the legislature. But it is neat to have a true international gym and tourist destination down the road from where you yourself live, whether you particularly agree with everything or you benefit from the kinds of things. And there's obviously plenty of people from Albuquerque go up to the opera. Plenty of us go to restaurants in Santa Fe or do certain things, go skiing. I've certainly done that a number of times. There are plenty of things for us, uh, the rest of New Mexico, to benefit from Santa Fe's unique position. It is indeed a unique city that a lot of people truly love.
Yeah,
All
let
right,
me just
moving
close by
on. Oh,
saying
go ahead.
congratulations, Santa Fe. And if you would only do less damage to the rest of us, you've damaged yourself a little in some of these policies, but it's mostly hurt the rest of the state a lot worse.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that when you have a unique city or unique area, you can enact a lot of bad policies. And I would include Chicago. They made the top 10. But Chicago's a huge city. And once you get out of the Magnificent Mile and the lakefront area, there obviously you see the crime statistics. You know that there are some really, really nasty areas of Chicago. And I've been around enough of Chicago to see some of those areas. And uh, yeah, I think that's a critical factor as well. And maybe with Santa Fe, those areas are a little more well hidden, a little smaller than they are in Chicago. But there's a lot of places around New Mexico that suffer consequences of the bad policies that do come from Santa Fe in a similar way. So, all right. News story and a little conversation I want to have about property taxes. The headline from Channel 13, July 14, 2025. Bernalillo County properties see increase in value. Uh, this ongoing saga with Damian Lara and the property tax assessments. And it says, uh, Alan Sigmund Real Estate Group, Lance Sigmund, although humorously, in the KRQE story, it says Alien Sigmund Real Estate Group. I didn't know they had a Roswell office, uh, but they said on average we had about a 76% increase in the values of our commercial properties, said Lance Sigmund to KRQE. And, you know, they're not the only ones. We've had Doug Peterson on the show. Uh, Damian Lara claims that his hands are tied and that he's just getting all of these assessments up to their fair market value. Uh, Call me suspicious. There's Rhiannon Samuel from NAOP, who had another quote in this story. There's a lot of folks who are deeply concerned and frustrated when they get a letter that says their property has gone up 704%. That is not something that can be absorbed in a single year. And of course, uh, that's mostly commercial. I have a brief email I want to read parts of to you. This is on the residential side. So both are issues, but this gentleman wrote to me and said, having recently gone through a formal property tax hearing or appeal hearing, I witnessed firsthand how the tax system, backed by a small army of government employees, is calibrated to extract the maximum legal amount from homeowners every year. The justification, comparable home sales in the area. But here lies the sleight of hand. Those sales are used not to validate your home's assessment, but to build a cap buffer, a hidden cushion that guarantees maximum tax increases for years to come. The gentleman writes, my home's assessed value was capped at $424,000. Yet the county cited recent neighborhood sales at $525,000. That $100,000 gap becomes the breathing room they use to impose the full 3% increase each year, no matter what the market does. In essence, home values would have to crash dramatically before he ever sees tax relief. So he goes on to note that the dynamic has broader implications. Cities and counties now enjoy a predictable compounding revenue stream that doesn't require voter approval, doesn't reflect service demand, it isn't capped by reality. With each passing year, this model incentivizes local governments to expand bureaucracy without public accountability. Budgets rise not because of need, but because they can. During my hearing, I was outnumbered 7-2 by government staff. The system has grown around protecting itself, not serving the taxpayer. It's empire building, hidden behind evaluation formula. And my hope, I would like to have the treasurer on to speak a little bit about this. I tend to not blame, I look at the assessor as maybe in the case of New Mexico's property tax system, more of the messenger, although I think he's managing the system in a way that is harmful. But I really think that our property tax structure needs to be addressed in a more thorough way. Because as Damian Lara describes it, basically the local governments set a budget for what they want revenue wise, and then the taxes are adjusted to go fund those budgets. There's not a lot of constraints in the system aside from that 3% in the case of owner occupied private, non-commercial property taxes. That's the way it works, and it's concerning.
Paul, there is no doubt it's concerning. And, what this reminds me of in a weird way is this almost seems like a form of civil asset forfeiture. If you remember back, New Mexico is one of the first states that outlawed this. And so, if there were property that law enforcement was able to confiscate as a part of a crime, it would keep the money no matter whether it was whether the asset was owned by the person committed the crime or not. In cases of cars, if they had a car, it didn't matter if there was a car. If it was somebody else's car, they kept it. And in this case, the crime seems to be owning real estate in New Mexico is cause for something that, a tax to be raised as much as they want. It just does not quite seem right. And, certainly, if you follow Grover Norquist's approach to how taxation works, if you are going to always set taxes based on how much money a government wants to spend, you're probably in for ever increasing taxes to the point that it'll, ruin communities, ruin governmental entities, and take into its extreme, as we're seeing in Washington, possibly even ruin a great nation like the United States if we're not careful.
I'm going to read another bit on the property tax issue. This is from a third party who had an email dialogue with Assessor Damian Lara. He's the Bernalillo County assessor for those who don't live in this area, but he describes the system thusly. New Mexico property tax system can be difficult to understand. In New Mexico, the system is set up by the New Mexico Constitution and the legislature. The county assessors have the responsibility to value or assess the taxing authorities, e.g., counties, municipalities, school districts, hospital districts, soil and water, et cetera, have the responsibility to request a budget from New Mexico's Department of Finance and Administration. DFA has statutorily created a formula to set the property taxes. The DFA takes the assessment, multiplies the requested budgets from the taxing authority, and sets the tax rate. That is how property taxes are calculated. So that seems to me a very troubling system because it's basically, as I understand it, from the Bernalillo County assessor, the governments just say, well, this is the amount of money we need. You, Mr. Assessor, or Miss Assessor, if they are a woman, goes and finds that money, and they have to tax whatever at whatever rate they can to generate those dollars. There's very little in the way of any protections or check on these government entities from simply requesting as much money as they think they can possibly get out of this deal. And of course, the governor's in charge of the Department of Finance and Administration. So, in a politically more conservative, more welcoming of taxpayer arguments, I think we might have a situation where we needed to redo the entire property tax structure in a way that is a lot more equitable. And I think, you get into things like industrial revenue bonds, and simply, while I generally don't love them, they provide that property tax exemption we've talked about in recent episodes, at least indicating to the public the transparency issue of what kind of property tax hit are the rest of the businesses and people taking when you give these industrial revenue bonds and tax exemptions out to businesses that politicians prefer. So a lot of issues there. No surprise that the playing field is on the side of the taxing authorities and government, and that taxpayers, both commercial and in terms of residential building owners, house owners, are not protected very effectively in New Mexico. Any other thoughts on that, Wally?
Well, it just reminds me a little bit of the joke, the simplified Form 1040. How much do you make? Send it in. In this case, is how much is your property worth? Oh, we don't care what it's worth. We're going to tell you what it's worth, and we're going to charge you an ever increasing rate because we want money and we can do it.
All right. Well, last thing on the list, KOB.com, Channel 4. They are hiring at the City of Albuquerque Transit Department new transit security officers, 25 of them to be exact, following concerns about bus safety. In fact, apparently there was recently an incident where a bus driver stabbed a passenger to death, at least allegedly. We'll see what happens in that particular case. But Albuquerque Police Chief Harold Medina says more security on buses will cost more money. You know, this is just unbelievable. It's one of the reasons we included the so-called free buses on our candidate survey. It's one of the reasons why we've opposed this free bus scheme from the very beginning. I think it's harmful. I think it's negatively impacted safety on the buses, and this is the upshot. So now we make buses free, then we pay for it with having to hire all these new security officers. So we take it coming and going, Wally.
Yeah, there is no question that this is just another disturbing one. And Paul, the other issue uh, that I have is, will this make a difference? I think it might, and so it's like it's gotten to the point where our bus system is so dangerous, we need the equivalent of air marshals, to that are in the skies to prevent hijackings and other things that happened after 9/11, and that's what it looks like we're getting ready to do in Albuquerque. Although, Paul, keep in mind that 25 approved officers does not mean that there will be 25 people wearing the uniform riding the streets of Albuquerque anytime soon. So, it's hopefully they will. It's like I think this is better than nothing. But yeah, this is a band-aid that's required because of a lot of other things have gone wrong from a law enforcement point of view.
And I'm going to be doing a records request to see what the cost is of these people, these security officers, and whether that's borne by the transit budget or the law enforcement budget, because I think it is important to know what that really does to the overall losses of the city transit department and their bus system, because free buses was a bad enough policy. We knew it wasn't helpful to the overall system. It didn't do much for ridership, but now it's obviously forcing or creating the desire and the need for increased security due to additional issues on the buses in Albuquerque. So, well, Wally, I look forward to seeing you in person next week. Enjoy your time up in Alaska. We'll do the same here in the Big Apple before hopefully Zoran Mandami doesn't become mayor of New York. And one of his stated policies is making the subways free. So we're going to be spending some time on the subways in New York City here. We'll see how that all goes, but I'm looking forward to seeing the Big Apple for the first time in really quite a while. So take care, and thanks everybody for listening to this week's episode. Find all episodes at tippingpointsnm.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation's YouTube channel. Subscribe to the show at Apple, Stitcher, or tell Google Home. Play Tipping Point, New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.